Okay, hi everybody, and welcome today excuse me for just a second. Welcome to a roast conversation with Candice Madison. This webinar is the first in our new Bellwether Roast Lab series. This is a series of talks, events, and educational experiences where coffee roasting professionals, thought leaders, tastemakers, and enthusiasts team up with Bellwether to get creative, push the limits of roasting theory, explore what's out there, and see what happens when traditional roasting meets innovative technology. Hi. Our Customer Roundtable series and our Roast Lab series together bring you monthly webinars featuring customers and thought leaders that we think of as important to the industry. There will be question and answers throughout the session today. And Liz Pashad will be moderating those, and they'll just be folded right into the interview. So go ahead and ask your questions. The first in this Roast Lab series is, as I mentioned, Candice Madison. A really quick sort of intro to Candice, and then Candice will have an opportunity to introduce themselves. Candice is one of this year's Spread 20. I think we can all agree is a globally recognized expert in roasting. An SCA trainer, a Q grader, of course, the founder of, and Candice, I might mispronounce it, Kendake? Kendake?
It's Kendake, yeah, it's actually
Kendake.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I realize I need to make that more obvious.
Kendake. You're hereby invited to call me Arnold 15 times. Okay. So Kendake Coffee. And I think we can all agree, just one of the real leaders in this field. You can find Candice teaching out there at SCA certified campuses, at the SCA Expo, where I have taken a lot of great coursework over the years. I think it's very valuable. World of Coffee, of course, the Roasters Guild Retreat, which is a really special place to be, and other specialty coffee events around the world, including notably Coffee Fest LA, where we will also be with Candice, and that is at the end of this month in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so also I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce Liz Pashad, who, as mentioned, is going to be moderating questions, and Liz will then direct message me with your questions as they come through. Okay, so Candice, here's your opportunity for you to reveal to us a little bit more about yourself, your origin story, or as you were joking, is your villain arc.
Yeah.
We're not all superheroes out there, right? So Candice, you have the floor. Just tell everybody how you would like to introduce yourself.
Never say that. It's funny, I was reflecting upon this, and I remember when I first started in coffee in what feels like 2 seconds ago, it was really easy to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Candice. I'm a barista. I've worked here, and here. I've taken these classes. And then getting involved in such a vibrant and exciting and insanely faceted industry as coffee, I now find that I have to shorthand all the stuff I've been given the opportunity to do. But you did a great introduction. And yeah, I'm a CQI instructor. I'm hoping to get onto the professional level of processing because I like to work my way back down the supply chain. Everyone jokes that I'm going to own a farm by the time I'm 60, which is like 3 years away. I call it my supervillain arc because I don't believe that anyone, at least anyone like me, really needs to follow a set of steps to get to where they want to go. They just need the curiosity, the desire, and like just the passion. And that's why I'm still in this industry 15 years later. And the great part is you get to know one another. You said Roasters Guild Retreat, we're doing it this year. Why? Because it's fun. And I get to hang out with a bunch of roasters.
Yeah.
And then looking at the chat, my friend Wes, I met Wes when he was single. He's now married with 2 kids and moved countries. And, you know, evolving in this industry has been one of the greatest pleasures. So connecting with Bellwether as an evolving of technology just was a real spark of curiosity for me, and talking to you all and working with the team has been a real pleasure.
Yeah, I think from our side, we were like very gratified and flattered that you're willing to work with us. We have a great deal of respect, Candice, and We thought it would be just a really interesting thing to invite you into our house, like full access to the team, full access to the program, select a green coffee and create a roast profile for that coffee, right? So let's start at the beginning, which for people like us is always the green coffee. What can you tell me a little bit about the coffee, which of our coffees you chose and why you chose that coffee?
A Peruvian coffee whose name I will mispronounce and might ask you to say it, because
I think you got the True Pampa.
Yeah, but I keep calling it the Chumbawamba, and that is Angie's fault. So I didn't want to say that and be disrespectful. Peru, much like PNG, Papua New Guinea, for people who don't shorthand origin, and Indonesia in general, and places like Congo are producing coffee within my career lifetime that I didn't think I would see. The same with Brazil. All the origins that we think of as like shake at the bag of it, if I shake a bag of tea and all the wonderful tea leaves are here, and then there's just the, the stuff there, are proving to be, through intent and through dedication to processing, revealing some real jewels. And so I wanted to roast your Peru because I was always told that Peru was they're a great base for blends, they're just chocolatey, it's fine. And I'm like, no.
I bet that's what that person sounded like too.
Well, yeah, and they were English. So but there's this whole kind of like, the alchemy of roasting is so incredible that it took me a shortish amount of time to realize that people were describing flavor profiles that they were able to execute from a coffee, and not what the coffee tasted like. And then not reflecting the processing method when roasting can mask a lot of the really awesome flavor notes. So this Peru was delicious. The green specks are always where I start. So without fail, before I even think about what my profile is going to be, I'm looking for the green coffee metrics. I want to know the moisture. I want to know the density. I want to know the screen size. I want to even know the water activity, but that's just for storage. That's not necessarily for roasting. I want to know the process. I want to know, how long it's been, in port for, if it's spot, things like that will inform how I roast the coffee. And it's not sort of like a simple roadmap I can give you. It's years of experience that make you recognize how to treat that coffee. And this coffee had great specs. And I really wanted to know what I could eke out of it that was a little different from what you all had been roasting it as. And it's delicious. It's
really I'd just like to say a little bit more about the Churro Pampa. It is a very special coffee to us. The team at Churro Pampa, they're a company, not a cooperative, but they offer a lot of the same services that a cooperative might. And they're very forward thinking. They've built a very impressive operation in a short period of time in Peru. And we actually just sent the team there. Liz is just back from Peru, I think around this time last week, Liz. And to cement that relationship and look forward to what we always look forward to at Bellwether, which is trying to find a way to set prices based upon living income benchmarks for those farmers. That is the price floor, by the way. I think people who are in the trade might know that prices are pretty high right now. So it's not the ceiling. We'll pay whatever the market price is, but we won't pay less than what we think will allow for a dignified life for the farmer. So all of that, and as Candice mentions, it's a truly exceptional coffee in terms of how it tastes. So next up, I think, Candice, so you have the Churro Pampa, and you've told us a little bit why you chose it. But when you tasted it, the first time you tasted it on the cupping table and you thought about it, what did your goals become in designing this roast profile? Like, what was the flavor profile you were trying to elicit, or the mouthfeel you were trying to elicit? What did you think the coffee could become?
Well, I think that if you're a roaster who likes to eat or make cocktails, I find that it's really easy to use analogies like that. When I call this the golden handshake in coffee, you have to be able to cup in order to be able to roast. It's not an option. You can't say, well, I'm a roaster, I'm really going to, I'll cup in time, or, that I'll just, breeze through that. Every point that you're cupping at, fragrance, aroma, the different temperatures you cup through the coffee are revealing to you how the roaster affected change to that coffee. When I first tasted it, I knew there was a little more to it that I wanted. Nothing wrong with the roast that you all had come up with, but this was my personal Like, I'm a chef, this is what I wanted to add to it, and
Absolutely.
every chef is known for their like signature little things. And what I really prize, coming from a Scandinavian slash UK kind of roasting start, what I really prize is revealing the characteristics of a coffee, almost like a sample roast, but with a lot more depth and development, so that those original characteristics stick. The acidity of this coffee is so beautiful. It's delicate, and you can destroy it by roasting too far at the end. And what I wanted to do with this profile when I cupped it, I was like, okay, I'm tasting that acidity, but I'm also tasting a development that I think is masking some of that acidity. And I really want some of this unctuous, syrupy sweetness to be cut a little bit with that acidity, in that way that kettle corn is really satisfying, because you can taste the sweet and you can taste the salt. And together it creates a synergy that's like, wow, in my mind, superior, which is why there are 2 empty packets in my drawer.
Yeah. I particularly like the expression of malic acid in this coffee. I think that it has a great sort of apple pear thing that can come out there. But I obviously I was a giant fan of what you were able to do with it. So okay, now you're sort of set. Okay, I think I understand where I want to take this coffee. What the destination I have in mind is, right? Now here's your opportunity to go ahead and get as technical as you would like about how did you then structure your roast profile to elicit that result.
So for me, again, I'm gonna use a bit of sign. I know a lot, and I tend to kind of go off on places that people can't follow. So I use analogies a lot. You know your roaster, or hopefully you know your roaster. So for me, I select the correct pan. And as everyone just saw, I had like a million different pans behind me. So I wanted to use a profile that best suited the bellwether. So if I'm on a different machine, I'll use a profile that suits that machine to eke out what I wanted. Tasting it, I was like, okay, so people talk about coffee stages, and they've talked about them differently at least 8 times since I've been in coffee. So I'm just going to use very simple nomenclature, or I should say in America, nomenclature, to talk about the stages of coffee. So stage 1, you're dehydrating. Stage 1 is when you drop the beans in and you're looking to get to the turning point and you're pushing the coffee up the hill. That's what's physically happening thermodynamically to the coffee. And that is another lecture that I just delivered to South Africa, and I can deliver that somewhere else too. There's also an organic chemistry lecture that I deliver, and that one makes people cry, but we can do that some other time. No tears today. So in the first part of that roast, I know that if I push that coffee, not overly aggressively, but definitely push that coffee up the first part of the hill before I get to the yellowing stage of the Maillard reaction, I'm going to be able to force more of the reactions that are happening there. I'm going to get those molecules moving faster and those compounds moving and denigrating faster. And all of the enzymatics, all of the aldehydes are being released and produced here. And those are the aromas and fragrances, and they have a lot to do with acid formation. Too technical. Okay, so the first part of stage 1 is all
I'm into it. I'm like, no.
So stage 1 for me is thinking, how much fruit and how much acidity do I want in this coffee?
Yes.
Because that's the only place that those chemical reactions are happening.
Yes.
And they are primary in stage 1. So I want to know, if I'm roasting for somebody who wants something, if I'm roasting for somebody else and they don't want it too acidic and they're not really up on the fruitiness, I'm a little gentle on this stage. For me personally, I go all out. And then once I see a hint of yellowing, and this is really interesting about Maillard, the Maillard reaction is a cascading reaction. Much like caramelization, it's not one reaction, it's multiple reactions all taking place and cascading. There are temperature ranges at which you can say that this is happening. There's no definitive temperature. Everyone's like, oh, it happens at 310 or it happens at 305. I'm like, no, it just does not, because you're working with an organic product, which means that you don't know that that composition is the same as that bean is at composition. You don't know how much surface water has been evaporated, and you don't know what's going on. So until then, you need to use your sight. And I think roasters are really lucky with the bellwether, because they have all these people with this technological knowledge getting them on the startup. And then when they want to take over, they have that knowledge there as their base to kind of like play. And that's what coffee is playing. So once you see the coffee yellow, I was like, okay, so I've got my acidity and I've got my fruitiness. Now I need to balance it with a really nice sweet note. So I'm going to let that coffee, I'm going to come back a little. And I only, when I'm thinking about coffee, I'm only thinking about 2 or 3 gas changes at all for an entire roast. So I'm like, okay, right, I'm going to back off now. I'm going to back off now. And I'm going to let all those delicious reactions of Maillard start and evolve. And so I call Maillard out really early. Some people wait till the whole bean is yellow, like properly yellow. I look for the yellowing because I know that reaction will have started before I can see it, which means it's already in full swing. And I want to make sure it has time. And so instead of aggressively trying to push it, now I want the sugars and all the proteins, and Maillard reaction is a browning reaction that's to do with proteins, amino acid breakdown, and then caramelization starts a little bit after that, and that's more to do with the sugars. We talk about it all as kind of one clump because it's that gorgeous browning smell. It's that gorgeous like, sugary kind of like, if you have a sweet bread, it's not maybe sugar in it, but like that crust is like a little bit of sweetness from that Maillard. It's really delicious. And so for me, I'm like, okay, so I know that if I've aggressively pushed on stage 1, I'm going to have to float upwards on stage 2 so that that balancing act can give me what I want from the acidity and fruit and what I want from the sugars. And then
you're setting yourself up then also, right? Like it's exactly as you did with your dehydrating phase going into Maillard, right? It isn't just what you're achieving there. It's also how much energy are you investing in the system and how does that set you up for what happens next?
Absolutely. And so one of the most, for me, one of the best ever descriptions I had for being a new roaster is like, so we didn't have Cropster, we didn't have profiling, we had nothing. You all are so lucky with this technology.
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff on graph paper in my early days, I remember. Every 30 seconds, it'd be like, what is the temperature? Yep.
And I'm me trying to graph it and stopwatch it and do it at the same time.
Yep.
It was amusing, but I got good, like, you know. And so you're a Time Lord, you're a Doctor Who, because you're not actually seeing what's happening, much like if you look into this point in the universe, you're looking in the past, we're looking in the future. Whatever you want to affect, you've already done those changes. So as a roaster, you need to know what those changes will bring forward because you've already done them. If you put too much heat in, it's kind of a bit too late after Maillard.
Absolutely.
If you not put enough heat in, that's where you stall. And if you float Maillard too flat, that's where baking occurs. Baking doesn't really occur post first crack, which is where most people think it occurs.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I'm sure if there are other roasters here, there may be dogma getting smashed for them there, but
come at me, bro. I've been at I have these fights with like Marty Curtis and all those like OGs, as well as like OGs like me. I can't believe I'm old in this industry now. You sit around a fire and you smoke a cigar or whatever, and you talk for hours about how the other person is wrong, whilst all agreeing that all of your coffee is delicious. It's amazing.
Of course.
Because it's chefs.
To be fair, I think that has been the pastime of every roaster since the first time they stepped up to any roaster their first day. They then went and told everybody about, how correct they may have been in certain areas of dogma and how good their product is. We have an audience question that I think is really excellent. So Candice, can you just walk us through really quickly how you can tell in the cup post-roast that you baked your roast? How does that present?
So if you come take a Q class with me, I will explain this in massive depth, but I'll try and do it here. There are some very concrete markers of underdeveloped, overdeveloped, and baked coffee. Overdeveloped, some people like their coffee really dark. That's a difficult one for me to get behind, but baked coffee has some very, very clear benchmarks. The acidity will be flat. It's pretty much towards the cardboard end of the spectrum of taste. There will be very little complexity. And basically, I think the best word to use when describing the taste of baked coffee is meh.
I think that you really nailed it with cardboard. There is nothing, I find in baked coffee, there's little that is actually offensive. It isn't like a coffee which you have scorched or faced or something like that. It is the absence of good, not the presence of bad, right? Yeah.
Like,
okay.
Yeah.
It's
Meh.
man. So let's go back. You were describing you floated this the Peru Churro Pampa through Maillard, so a gentle progression through Maillard, but without stalling, right? And then what?
And then so I am gonna be really honest here. Like from my bank of knowledge and the wealth of profiles I've built up, like either mentally or kind of like on software all over the world that I should probably like group together. If I know what's going on at first crack, I know exactly what changes I need to make. Now, all of the things that you're doing before first crack mean nothing if you can't control that. Because if you can't control first crack and the development after that, you're not tasting any of the work that you put in before. It's like my third driving test, which I would have failed for speeding if I hadn't come off the gas in front of a school. I was doing 50 kilometers an hour in a 20 kilometer an hour zone. Not smart. So it's like I'd done all the good work before there and literally was just about to fail right at the end. So treating a coffee at first crack is important. The reason I literally start up here with my gas and just make 2 or 3 changes down is because what your coffee is doing is endo and exotherming pretty much at the same time. You will hear that the coffee is endothermic until first crack and then it's exothermic, and that is not true. Something can endotherm and exotherm at the same time. These words just mean endothermic is something, or an endotherm is something that's taking on heat, and an exotherm is something that is giving off heat. So if you know that your bean, like the Peru, isn't going to go and explode into like a huge amount of heat that it's releasing from the beans itself, you can be quite confident at first crack that you can reduce your gas and the bean will carry itself through, and then allow, that reduced gas plus the bean energy in the drum will allow for the development that you want at the end. However,
yes.
If you have a natural coffee, like I always compare this to the natural Brazil, and I think people are calling this the U now, and there's flicks and there's all this. I don't understand any of this. All I understand is coffee. And what I know is if there's too much heat in my bean, I'll actually turn the gas off or turn it right down, depending on what roaster I'm using, and allow the bean to release all its energy without any compensatory energy entering the drum, wicking away airflow at that point. And you guys have a great, I've never seen this before. I was describing it to everyone the first time I saw a bell. There's like, there's no smoke, there's just water, it's so cool. And everyone's like, yeah, it's a chemical reaction, I know. But I thought that was excellent and really cool. And it's one of the things I really love about this machine, especially for people who are starting or new or even established roasters, that you get to play with a technology that allows you to do kind of a few different things. But if your bean is going to explode into the drum like that, you just reduce the gas and then turn it back up when the heat has dissipated and you've wicked away all that moisture, because the beans are releasing steam, which is water plus heat. So you wick all that away and you get to where you need to go. So the control that you have to observe first crack at least once. If you've not done it in the sample roaster, Bellwether have already done that for you. If you've not done it on your first profile, it's okay, because Bellwether have already done that for you. But if you're not, if you're designing a profile yourself, it's this portion of the roast that you're going to want to get the most control over. And so when you're cupping, this is what the way that you roast is the way that you taste. The dry fragrance in the cup is completely related to the drying stage of the roast. So you should be getting all your fruit and some of the acidity, maybe like coming off as lemon or apple, as you smell the dry fragrance. As you pour water on the ground and you smell the aroma, you're now getting an example of like the movement in the roast from the drying phase to the Maillard. And so basically, as you cup, you're cupping at the actual roast profile. So as the coffee is getting cooler and the way that you're taking in the coffee, you're understanding the manipulations that you need to make in the roaster, which is why I call it the golden handshake.
Yeah. No, there was something very, very different about the way that this all went for you than in a normal roast profile you may have designed. And just for everybody who I think most people are on this call are probably aware, but to make it totally explicit, when you design a profile on the Bellwether roaster, you design the profile. You actually tell the roaster what you would like to have happen to your green coffee on its way to becoming a roasted product. It is not a process control system. You define the outcome. And so how was that for you? Like, how did that change your experience of making a roast profile?
It was weird because I'm very used to putting stuff in a roaster and seeing what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then making my changes post that. But this actually, with the knowledge that's now available, we had none of this. We had some classes. I had to fly to America for all my classes in roasting when I first started. There was nothing in Europe. People weren't sharing any knowledge, and there was nothing out there. So I had to feel my way through. And then I remember I'm friends with a couple other people, and I remember Scott Rao brought his book out, his first roasting book, and he said, there's nothing that, don't trust intuitive roasters. And I went up, Scott, look, you and I are friends, but we're fighting. Because how am I supposed to do this? And I realized that there were people already doing this with their analytical brain. And now that I have more knowledge, it was really interesting to know I could do this. It wasn't, it didn't have to be like some alchemy rocket science. I could look at a roast profile and I could physically see the adjustments I want to make on the actual graph itself before I even put the coffee in.
Yep.
And to me, that's really revelatory because it means that there's much less waste. I already know if I have a starting base, mine is experience, yours on the call or others may be a base that you've been given and you want to make changes from. You are more empowered when you know about the roast process to create a profile that is going to be very near to what you want without having to waste buckets of coffee. And I think it's awesome. It's also really weird. It's like learning to drive a car backwards, but yeah.
It is. It was a mentality shift for me. I mean, designing the product, it was a mentality shift for me and for the other members of my team to sort of think about roasting in this way. But again, I agree with you about the progression here. When I learned to roast, it was like alchemy. Right. There were certain, I was taught, oh, you want to be at 345 degrees at 5 minutes or something like that. There was like some magic marker I had to hit, and I had a time and temperature goal I was trying to hit. And again, this is all in the days before roast data capture really existed in the modern form. And then we would cup everything out. We had that golden handshake, right? But the method to achieve the thing on the table was a lot of like the witches in Macbeth or something. It was like Eye of Nude, and and as I progressed and as I watched the industry progress, there was sort of a pseudoscience phase, I would say, where people kept on talking about things that I did not find to be grounded in chemistry or physics as I understood it. And then came some of the work that figures like Scott Rao and Rob Hoos did. And I can say that I don't agree with every statement that Scott Rao makes about how to roast, although I think that he has excellent advice. But I think that the industry is forever indebted to him for being, and in my mind, one of the first people that was really laid out his philosophy, black on white, in a book for people to react to.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that it's very difficult to be the first. And again,
yes.
I don't agree with everything that Rob says. I don't agree with everything that Ann Cooper, who is one of my absolute heroines, says. I don't agree with everything Scott says, but the wealth of knowledge and experience that different roasters bring actually make you a better roaster because it makes you defend your craft or accept that maybe there's a different way to do things. And I think it's like the resistance to any kind of new technology. You have some of the old school roasters going like, why are you doing it that way? And I'm like, well, why not?
Yeah, I had a friend back then, the old days, who refused to put a thermocouple, a bean probe in. He had old probats, and he would only use the old bimetal like candy thermometer that was in the air return, because he thought that everything else was going to ruin the coffee because it was not didn't have the like the je ne sais quoi or whatever. Like he was like, it's not going to work because it's not the way that crafts people do it. And there's this tension between craft and automation that is often highlighted, right? So I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about my view on this, and then I kind of want to hear your view, Candice. So I think that people like Scott, they started down as pioneers. They started sort of laying out the framework here because it gave people something to respond to. right? And then those responses were iterated upon, and that started to build something that was a little bit more like a scientific body of knowledge, right? And at Bellwether, what we did is we said, let's go ahead and try and take this one step further, right? Let's understand what a control system would have to be like to achieve a desired rate of rise.
Yeah.
Right. And so people don't have to be experts at manipulating the machine anymore. They can be experts at designing the roast profile.
Exactly.
Right? And so I'm very satisfied with that, because I think that what we really wanted is good coffee. But I know that that can be a very challenging mentality for some people to adopt. So, roasting on the Bellwether, how was that for you? Like, did you have the same sensation at all of losing the magic as you gained the precision? Or
I mean, I think a lot of this magic and craft and all of this is a lot of people who didn't know what the hell was happening at the beginning and would roast great coffee and didn't really know why. And so it's alchemy. I call myself an intuitive roaster. I've also done very deep dive studies, and you can read these in roast magazines, into thermodynamics and the chemistry of roasting in terms of I'm talking like organic chemistry, like micro reactions, and proper exploring the second law of thermodynamics in the way it comes to roasting. But I don't think about any of that stuff when I get to the roaster, because it's all already in there. So for me, it's a little different. I don't approach the roaster as it's kind of craft, and I really need to be the person in control, although I do roast manually all the time when I don't need to. And I didn't lose the magic. I was just fascinated. I'm not like with cars. I didn't like the Tesla when I first saw it because it was weird, and why it's this big, huge thing there and it drives itself and what's going on. And now I'm like, oh, these are fun. Like, it's like a new fairground ride. I love classic Broncos. I want one so badly, but I don't have $250,000. If you want to donate to the fund, please do. But love Lamborghinis. There is a niche and a place for every different type of technology in car making. Why is that not the same in roasting?
Yeah.
Just because somebody over there may not like a particular machine doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that machine. And just for the record,
We have lost your audio, Candice. I will fill this short technical interlude with a joke. Everybody understands there's about 150 shopping days left to Christmas. Candice has highlighted a couple of products that they enjoy. There's a Lamborghini and a classic fully restored Bronco. Are you back with us, Candice? You're on mute now. Ha! There's Candice.
A truck drove past me. Let me take a video and see if that helps. If traffic goes down my very quiet street, the Wi-Fi wave, I don't understand technology. So I've roasted on everything. I've designed a profile for a 120 oil Probat, 120 kilos I'm talking about. I've roasted on every manner of Loring. I've roasted on all Diedrichs. I've roasted on Gohots. I've roasted on everything, and they're all different and they all do their job. It's just what you prefer. The thing is with the Bellwether that's most startling to the roasting community of old, I think, is the fact that it takes a lot of the ego out of roasting. You don't have to stand there and look fancy and smell things and whatever, because actually you've done all the work beforehand. And you've instructed the machine what to do. That's what we do these days. That's what technology is about. So I actually was fascinated, and I can't wait to come down again. I want to see what else.
Well, we'll have you anytime. I have a couple of questions from the audience that I think are really high quality here. And so this first one I think is great. So you've talked a little bit about what it's like to roast from sight, right? And you're looking for yellowing to show Maillard and that kind of thing. But could you address what roasting is like if you are if you're blind, if you're sight impaired, and you're using olfactory and auditory cues?
Absolutely. So when I first, let me close my eyes actually, because I have to do that. Sorry, and I'm not doing that to be ableist. I'm doing that because I'm trying to think what the smells are like. It's a beautiful California day, and I'm just looking at gorgeous flowering trees. I'm thinking florals. When you put the coffee in, the first smell I get is this kind of almost deep green vegetal smell as the water is evaporating. As the coffee turns and is progressing through the drying phase and you take it out, it smells more and more towards it's getting to kind of more like almost like a drying grass smell. As it hits Maillard, I get a very distinct sweet smell that moves into bread. Now, there aren't many auditory cues at this point for me. It's very much smell and sight. So taking sight away, going through Maillard, you are smelling kind of like more towards bread. And all of a sudden, if you're outside the roastery, actually you're smelling bacon, which is why I used to love running outside the roastery to smell. But obviously not in this case. So if you're smelling on a traditional roaster around Maillard caramelization, that's when you start getting the bread to kind of like sugary sweet coffee smell. Then caramelization progresses and you're moving towards first crack. That's your roasted coffee smell right there. First crack is like it, there's a difference between first and second crack. So first crack to me sounds like popcorn, and second crack to me sounds like Rice Krispies.
I was gonna say, it always sounds like Rice Krispie to me.
Okay, I'm gonna try my video again and see if
and Gary, so Gary, this question came in from you from Unseen Bean, and I wanted to elaborate a bit on it myself, because I think, speaking now about the Bellwether does not have a trier, and because it's very important to us that we conserve energy and not allow any smoke into the environment. It's also so well sealed, you generally cannot hear a first crack. So I think that if you are a blind roaster and you're approaching our device, the way to think about how to design your roast profile is really about the golden handshake. That's like the thing, right? Because if you're an experienced roaster and you are familiar with some of the phases that Candice is talking about, you don't actually need to see the roaster to respond on a Bellwether, right? And so you would be designing that roast profile in advance, executing the roast and tasting what happened on the cupping table. And then that would tell you where you need to adjust.
Yeah, and Gary, I'll tell you something that most roasters don't do that I do. Once I have developed a roast profile, I never take the trier out.
Yeah.
Because all you're doing is letting cold air into the roaster, and I want a thermodynamically sealed environment for my coffee to roast in. So for the most part, to use smell, like I'll take the trier a tiny bit, but not actually out. But the smell is coming out anyway, for the most part on older roasters. And once I know I'm nearing first crack from my chart, then I might take it out for visuals. But I'm actually listening more than I'm looking for first cracks. Some first cracks are very, very quiet. There's no in the Bellwethers, and this takes that kind of anxiety away from me. Like, did I hear it? Did I hear it? Like, did I see it? Did I hear it? It's like that's been taken away. But I learned to roast on sight and smell, and realized that it was actually smell for me that was most important when I was roasting on a sample roaster.
Yeah, it was a transition for me. Okay, sorry. Would it work on voiceover and iPad? I am not sure of the answer to that question. And I think that Liz will take that question down and we'll follow up with you afterwards. And anybody else is curious, just let us know. We have definitely designed the device with such questions in mind, but I'm not sure of the exact answer to that question. I'll tell you, Candice, when I am roasting on the Bellwether, I no longer use any sensory inputs. I'm straight up just looking at the profile, right? It's a very consistent roaster. And so it doesn't act differently if it's hot or if it's cold, or, first batch, 100th batch, it's all totally consistent. And so it's an environment where you can iterate on the profile at the profile's design, and it'll yield a result. Okay, 3 minutes left. So it's almost time for outros here. We'll try and sneak in one more question. Let's see here. Is an initial soak time beneficial to overall control of the roast?
Yeah. So in the Bellwether has, much like some of the newer automated manual machines, has an actual activates like automatic warming up and cycling, so it makes the machine as thermodynamically stable as possible, and that's what you want.
Oh, that's the soak that you're talking about. Yes. Yeah, I can lend a little bit of help here. Yeah, our roaster does not need to soak per se, because it's very well censored, and we know not just what the temperature in the drum is, we know the temperature of the metal in the drum, not just the air temperature, not just the return temperature, not just the inlet temperature. We know the temperature of every assembly in the roaster, which helps us determine when the roaster is truly, quote unquote, thermally soaked. And it does get thermally stable, which in my experience, you actually cannot get on an open flame drum roaster. In an open flame drum roaster, there's always one part of the roaster that's getting hotter and another part that's cooling off. And we can actually kind of coast.
Forever.
Yeah, yeah. And I think with that, unfortunately, because this has been a really fun conversation, I think we're out of time. So everybody who participated today, thank you so, so much. This webinar will be posted again on our website for people. And again, this has been Candice Madison. I'm Arno Holshoe, and Liz Pashad has been moderating. And thanks everybody for participating today.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.